Hi, welcome to anglos.co.il. Today in the studio we have a guest that some of you may have seen before. He's returning to discuss with us child custody in Israel, Jay Hait from Hait Family Law. Jay, thanks for coming in again and being with us.
Happily, thank you for having me again.
Great. Jay, as I said, we're going to speak today a little bit about child custody laws in Israel. Maybe to start off, can you give us a little overview about child custody and what does it involve?
Okay, so first of all, the standard that we use in child custody cases is the best interest of the child. Okay, in other words, where are they best off? And that's number one. Number two is we still have, even though everyone's been trying to change, something called the Tender Age Doctrine, which means that the assumption, which can be overcome, is that children under the age of 6, their best interest is to be primarily with their mother.
Okay.
And third of all of that being said, there is a swing in the pendulum right now, and more they're going towards the concept of joint custody in these cases.
Is that even for children below 6, or are we talking 6 and above in terms of the joint custody?
So first of all, it depends on the situation. It depends on the judge. And I would say once children are no longer breastfeeding, there's more and more tendency, even if it's not full joint custody, is to move it towards joint custody.
Great. Can you maybe explain what is the difference between custody and guardianship?
Okay, yes. Guardianship is something that both parents have that has nothing to do with custody. It's the obligations and benefits that parents have with regards to their children. So it's usually the right to make healthcare decisions, the rights to make educational decisions, the obligation to pay certain expenses for their children. Okay, that's guardianship.
Okay.
Custody is where is the child living and at what time frame is he in house A with mom or in house B with dad.
Got you. So custody is basically covering the physical, where is the child, whereas the guardianship is more around the obligations and rights around the child.
And I stress and rights rather than just saying obligations, because I cannot tell you how many people call my office and say, hey, my ex-spouse, I'm not going to say husband or wife, has just tried signing up my children into a different school system.
Yes.
Can I prevent it?
Right.
And that's one of your rights as a parent, to be involved in making that decision on education. And by the way, if they can't reach an agreement, then obviously you can go to court. But the point is, it's a right that you have as part of your guardianship rights.
Got you. Can you maybe explain a little bit what is joint custody, this concept of joint custody?
Yeah, really it's a time issue. In other words, how much time is the child or children with each of the parents, okay? And it really is a percentage-based issue. Now, sometimes we call it joint custody, even though, it's 45%, 55%.
Okay.
But the idea of joint custody is, that you're splitting equally the time and the obligations regarding taking care of the children up until they attain majority at 18.
Okay, so it doesn't literally mean that the time with each parent is split 50-50. It may be determined that they have differing amounts of time with each parent, but they still have joint custody.
But it's going to be more or less the same time. You're not going to see someone spending 1 day a month with the child and calling it joint custody. You're not going to see someone spending only 1 day a month with a child anyway.
Right.
Okay, but what I'm saying is, if that were to happen, it's still, they wouldn't be allowed to call it joint custody. It has to be, more or less. As a matter of fact, the traditional custodial arrangements, which have been 2 days a week with the non-custodial parent, plus alternate weekends, is considered to be between 38 and 40%. Okay, and that's still not joint custody. So it's got to be above that for it to be considered joint custody.
So who determines that? Who determines that time split?
Look, if the parents reach an agreement, which I always strongly encourage people to do, then the parents do. If the parents aren't able to reach an agreement, then a judge will make a determination based upon either social workers and or psychologist reports, which take into account reports from teachers and interviews with the child, interviews with the parents, etc.
What would be the grounds for one parent not to get joint custody?
That's not the right terminology. It's not the grounds.
Okay.
What has to happen is somebody has to demand to get joint custody.
So that's not the default. Joint custody is not the default.
No, we're moving towards that.
Okay.
But as of right now, I would not say that it's the default yet.
Okay. So it would be the other case that you mentioned where you said the non-custodial parent would get a lesser amount of time, maybe 2 days. Is it 2 days a week, and then every alternate weekend?
Alternate weekends, and then during vacation. So you might say, I know that I said at some point, wait a second, 2 days and alternate weekends doesn't equal 38 or 40%, but during vacation periods, it's 50%.
Okay.
So it averages out.
Got you. Can we maybe talk about? Maybe we'll dig a little bit deeper. Let's use a case. Let's say, for example, now two parents get divorced and they now have custody over the child. Let's say, for example, we have a case where one parent is religious, one parent is not religious, and the religious parent is concerned that the child will not have a religious upbringing. How do we deal with that?
Okay, so first of all, the general rule is that the status quo stays. Now, the most important thing in that part is schools, okay? In other words, if the parents had been raising the child and they were going to religious schools, and now the parent who has primary custody decides, I want to put them into a non-religious school, then the other parent would object. Okay? But as a general rule, one of the things that I always tell people, and by the way, when we work agreements, in other words, when it's not litigation, this is something that I always tell people to consider. A lot of times we have spouses or cases that I've seen where one person is more observant for the other parent, and it's clear that they're going to be less observant, and I'm being really careful with my terminology, after they split up. So sometimes what we'll do is in the agreement, we'll say, but they agree that while the child is with them, they're going to be keeping the Sabbath or keeping kosher, etc. But if they don't agree to it and it goes through litigation, first of all, that may be, depending on the judge or the rabbinic court judges, something that is considered in determining where custody is going to lie and where the visitations or how the visitation arrangements are going to be done. But big picture, one of the things that I always tell my clients is that understand, you're getting divorced from this person because you don't see eye to eye on things. And understand that you are not going to be able to control what the other person is doing 100% of the time when the kids are over there. And I tell them you have to learn to let loose, because once you're divorced, it's going to be very hard to go and control the other person. And that's why I say, if you can reach an agreement, agreements are usually honored more often than rulings by a third party. And I say to them, work it out. There are for sure things that they want that will happen when the children are with you, for example. And if you want to make sure that they'll keep Shabbat, then be willing to say that, hey, if they want to come over on Shabbat and see them once in a while, or whatever it is, be more flexible so that they'll be flexible, so you can reach an agreement that will really be kept. Because if you don't reach an agreement, even if a third party decides, yes, it's got to be this way, enforcing it is going to be hell. So you don't want to be there. You want to be in a place where you're not going to be 100% happy. You understand, and by the way, this happens a lot more in my practice anyway, not with religious issues, but with education styles. In other words, one parent is an authoritarian. The kids can't watch TV until all their homework is done. And when I represent that person, I tell them, listen, I understand that that's very important to you, but you have to understand that when the children are with the ex-spouse, you can't expect that they're going to do it. If you can get them to do it, wonderful. But if not, what are you going to do? Go to court over it?
Right.
No. So understand that's part of the reason that you're divorcing them is because you don't see eye to eye on a whole bunch of things. So.
Yeah. How do you go about ensuring that you get to see your child after a divorce?
So first of all, in any court ruling and or agreement, we have set time periods. But the question isn't how do you ensure seeing them after, it's what do you do if the primary custodian parent or the other parent doesn't let you see the kids or turns the kids against you.
Yes.
Okay, and that is primarily a problem when parental alienation is involved.
Okay.
Okay, and it's a very sad and heartbreaking situation, but that's the time where I say, and understand, I'm the type of person who says, always reach agreements. But if you can't reach an agreement and they do it again and again and again, that's the time that you have to go to court. And there's been a swing towards more understanding and working with people when PAS is going on. PAS is parental alienation syndrome.
Okay.
But understand, it's a hard fight, it's a long fight, and you have to be prepared. And unfortunately, there are many cases, especially depending on which judge you get, where you don't come out with a happy outcome at the end of the day. But that's the point where I say, this is a fight that's worth fighting because for all of us, our children are, the most important things in our lives.
Sure.
So.
Got you. Let's say, obviously, for Olim, we have a case where one of the parents takes the child out of the country. I'm assuming it would be quite difficult to do without the other parent's consent, but assuming that you do, what are the grounds?
So what you're talking about is parental kidnapping.
Okay.
And usually the problem isn't them taking them out. In other words, we look at the Italian case, the Barron case.
Yes.
That was a case where someone took them out. So that's clear kidnapping. As a matter of fact, day one, I was telling everybody, hey, I'm willing to bet 50 cents on the dollar, whoever wants, that they're going to return the kid, because that was pretty clear. Okay?
Yeah, it's quite topical. I believe the kid's just been told they have to return the child back to Italy now.
Correct.
Okay, because there's another family member in Italy.
That the Italian court
Yes.
had said would have custody over the child, or at least temporary custody over the child at that point in time. But usually what happens here is someone leaves and they just don't come back, or someone comes...
So with the permission of the other spouse knew that parent was going on a holiday or going to visit family members.
And they go to, let's say, I'm going with dad. Dad lives in America. I'm going to visit dad. And then I get a call, hey, I'm sorry, I took him to the airport, but he doesn't want to come back.
Right.
Okay? That is an unlawful or a civil kidnapping and pursuant to the Hague Convention.
Okay.
And then what you would do is you would bring suit pursuant to the Hague Convention.
Okay.
I'll give you some of these cases are always heart-wrenching cases.
Yeah, I'm sure.
They're always heart-wrenching cases. I'll tell you about one case that I had where a family, Anglo-Israeli mixed family, went to the United States, and then they decided to stay in the United States. And one of the spouses, right after a holiday, said, I'm taking the kids out to a ball game. Right. They had 5 children, and that person was successful in getting 3 of the children on the plane. Oh, wow. 2 of the children weren't able to come for technical reasons. Yes. And he came, and we had the whole Hague trial here, and eventually got the children returned to the United States. But it was absolutely heart-wrenching, and I can tell you that all of the cases that I have are heart-wrenching. I can tell you about one that I had just this summer, and in this case, the couple lived in a European country, and the husband came back and forth to Israel, and eventually they all decided to come to Israel, and then the spouse said she was unhappy or she wants to go back, and he had a court order against the children being able to leave. And in that case, it started in really World War III. And one of the things that I did is I said to them, listen, we can go through and I'm going to win. We went to the first court hearing, and the judge basically said, that Mr. Hait's right, this isn't a kidnapping, do you want to continue this? And then I told my client, listen, understand, we can get the ruling, and you've heard the judge, but understand that you keep telling me that you don't want your marriage to fall apart.
Yes.
Okay, and if that's the case, I'm telling you that once we get this judgment, the chances are you're going to get divorced. So let's freeze everything. Let's reach an agreement that the children are going to be staying here, and let's reach an agreement that the two of you are going to go into intensive therapy, and that if after X period you decide to go back to the European country, fine. And he accepted it.
Okay.
So on the one hand, I didn't get another notch of winning another Hait case.
Yes.
On the other hand, I felt really good because I knew that this person didn't want the marriage to end, but this was just such an incredible issue between them that they needed help to be able to reach a decision on how it would be.
It's great, so you saved the marriage.
We'll see in another year or two when they tell me that, yes, they're still staying together, and then I'll say yes. I see the keep on my head. I always tell people there's one thing in our daily prayers. I always say, who are the people who earn their place in the world to come? People who help maintain peace between husband and wife. And I always say, if I get to do that a couple of times a year, then, for all my other things, maybe I'll still be able to get into the right place at the end of the day.
That's great. Just by the way, where would that case actually take place in terms of the determination? If, for example, somebody took their kid to the US, would it be an Israeli case or would it be a US case?
So the main case would be wherever the child is located for the return. Okay. That's number one. But number two is a lot of times, even if it's a case where a child has been brought to a different country, what I will do is I will at least go and get a declaration from the court here that the child has been kidnapped, because that will help them in the other country to get the decision that the child should be returned.
Got it. Now, slightly different. What if the parent doesn't just leave, but let's say one parent decides, I don't want to live in Israel anymore, I want to move back to the UK, the States, wherever it may be. What do we do then in terms of custody?
Okay, so if they're still together, then the suit, if the person who's leaving wants to leave with the children, okay, and I've had a number of cases over the last couple of years with this, where I do a suit for custody and relocation, okay, for the parent to take the children and to leave. And of course, that's a hard suit depending on the circumstances, but it's something that is possible and winnable.
Yes.
Okay. On the other hand, if the person who wants to leave is the person who doesn't want custody or doesn't have custody, then the question becomes, okay, how do you ensure child support, etc., is going to continue to be paid? And in that case, if you have a child support judgment, then through Misrad HaMishpatim, through the Ministry of Justice, you're able to go and, again, I'm talking about American clients right now, not from other Anglo countries, but with American clients at least, the United States and Israel have a letter of understanding whereby the Ministry of Justice here will go and work to collect against that person in the United States.
Gotcha.
Okay? But of course, you have to address other issues. I mean, usually what I would tell people is, hey, let's reach an agreement. And in the agreement, we'll cover not only the child support, we also cover visitations, we also cover certain expenses and visitations both there and here for the other parent. Again, and then we have it entered in as a judgment.
Got you. Now, we often, I think something that comes up a lot is, we spoke about that generally up until age 6, that generally the mother will always get custody of the child.
Not always, that there's an assumption that the best interests of the child will be with her.
And that's up to age 6?
Yes.
So at what point would the mother not be given custody of the child as a minor child?
Well, but the question is, do you mean where it would be joint custody or where the father would have custody?
Okay, so what is the default position is for a minor child is that the mother will get custody.
Wait, minor is 18 and under.
Okay.
Are you asking about 6 and under or just in general?
Yes, let's start with 6 and under.
Okay.
So a 6-year-old child, the default is, unless there's some circumstance that the mother will be the primary custodian unless there's joint custody.
It's under 6, right?
Okay.
And right, but that's something that can be disproven. In other words, at this point in time, what I always tell people is, look, let's look at your situation, okay? If it's a type of relationship that the father is always at work till 8 o'clock, never bathes the child, never feeds the child, isn't involved, then I tell him, hey, is it realistic to expect now that you will be the primary caregiver or that you will be 50% caregiver? And if it's not reasonably, then why are you going to fight about it? Are you fighting just to get a lower child support amount? That's not something that I would recommend. But if it's a different case where it's the opposite, the mother is always out till 8 o'clock at night and the father has been taking care of the child and doing the chugim, doctors, cooking, cleaning, bathing them, that's the type of situation where I would say, okay, there's no reason that it should be changed. And in that type of situation, I would challenge it. I see more and more couples in Israel sharing responsibility. And what am I talking about? I'm talking about I see more and more couples where they say, on Tuesdays and Thursdays, he's late at work and she comes home early and takes care of the kids. And Mondays and Wednesdays, she's late at work and he comes home early and takes care of the kids. Well, those are the types of situations that shout out, hey, this should be a joint custody case.
Got you. And in general, let's say even up to 18, again, what would the circumstances be that the mother is not given primary custody of the child, that it would be then given to the father?
More and more the custodial issues are being given to joint custody.
Right.
And remember, in a lot of countries, and I know we've spoken about this, there's a concept of sole custody.
Yes.
Okay, in Israel, they're even trying to get away from the concept of custody. Okay. And they talk about it as, the time arrangements. Okay. Okay, because everyone realizes that that's a how do you say ta'un? A loaded concept.
It's a loaded idea. Yeah.
So.
Got you. So generally, it's shifting towards more a case of, unless there's extenuating circumstances, joint custody of the minor child.
Correct. Again, especially when both parents have been involved, even if one is more involved and one is less involved. But more and more the pendulum is going towards the joint custody concept.
Got you. Now, just to jump back a little bit, we spoke a little bit before about parents moving overseas. Obviously, with Olim, this can always happen because we're all from other countries. Can you talk a little bit about the Hait Convention in regard to spouses leaving the country?
Well, the Hait Convention is really regarding the children.
Yes.
And the basic concept that we start with is that the last place that both parents agreed was the home country of the child. Okay. Is the home country of the child. Okay. Okay. Usually in Israel, when parents have moved here, that means that Israel is the home country.
Got you.
So if someone takes the child to a different country or doesn't return the child from a different country, then the basis is, hey, the last place that we agreed on it was Israel, and therefore the child should be returned to Israel. Now this is and people make this mistake, isn't for custodial decisions,
okay,
but for the place that the legal proceedings are going to happen.
Okay.
So they get returned here, and then the legal proceedings start.
Got you.
Okay? And that's why I say, or I think I told you, that most of the time when people go through a Hague case, okay, after that, the couple's going to get divorced.
Right.
So.
Yeah, you mentioned it. Can you just explain briefly what is the Tender Age Doctrine?
The Tender Age Doctrine is the assumption that for children under the age of 6, the best place is for their mother.
Okay, so that's what we spoke
think
about.
That's going to be changed. In other words, there's a movement, and I'm willing to, throw the dice that within a couple of years that'll be changed. Maybe not that it'll be under the age of 6. It'll be a lower age, but I think one way or the other they're going to change that. We'll see.
Okay, so it may be that it's still that the mother is the primary caregiver, but that age may just be lowered. Is that
right? That's what I think will happen. Okay. But again, this is speculation.
Great. Jay, maybe just before we wrap up, maybe there's something we haven't covered or touched upon, or some advice that you can give us regarding custody.
Yeah, one of the things that I always recommend that people do is, even if they're getting divorced, go to counseling I find that when people go to counseling for divorce, that the relationship that they create after divorce and the agreements that they come to are much more stable.
Yes.
That's number one. And number two, if people find themselves after they're divorced in high conflict with each other and always fighting about their children, that it might be worthwhile to look for a mita'em hori,
Okay.
a parental coordinator,
Okay.
to really take that off so that each person is able not to focus on the fighting, and a lot of times the children getting involved, being used as pawns over these issues, but to be able to focus on their children. That's basically it.
Great. Jay, thank you so much. Once again, it's been very informative. We thank you for your time and thanks for coming in.
Thank you for having me.
Great.
It's always a pleasure.
Thank you for watching.